Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you very much for tuning in. This is a screencast-o-matic presentation I'm recording for the part of the lesson that has looking at the war in the Pacific. Before we get started, please let me encourage you to open up to today's lesson and to scroll down the correct section and get ready to fill in the blanks with the key content that corresponds with this presentation. Please also remember that your task is to answer the critical thinking questions that coincide with the presentation too. Please be advised that we'll be jumping back and forth between the PowerPoint presentation and the doc, and you can fill in the answers accordingly. Please remember that you can also replay any part of this presentation for detail, clarity, or repetition later on. Let's go ahead and get started. While the war was coming to an end in Europe, the Allies continued to fight the Japanese in the Pacific. This fighting would take many, many years, but would bring an end to World War II. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, the United States of America sent troops to the Pacific Theater. The Pacific War revealed a new kind of fighting by using aircraft carriers. Now, the turning point in the war in the Pacific came at the Battle of Midway, which can be found here on this map. After the Battle of Midway, the Allies began to regain islands controlled by Japan. This would take many months/years, as you will soon see. Japan did not play by traditional rules of war either. For example, kamikaze pilots flew planes into battleships and aircraft carriers. Japanese soldiers refused to surrender and tortured Allied prisoners of war too. Photos and tales of Japanese treatment of US and Allied forces is iconic and well known from the World War II era. Now, the problem for the Allies was that the time and troops it would cost to retake thousands of islands the Japanese controlled in the Pacific would be a huge factor. For example, the fight for Guadalcanal took 6 months and cost 25,000 Japanese and 2,000 US lives. The United States developed an island hopping strategy to skip the heavily defended islands and seize islands close to Japan. From 1943 to 1945, the Allies took back the Philippines and were moving in on Japan. And in 1945, the Allies won the islands of Iwo Jima and Okinawa. You might recall seeing this picture before of US and Allied troops holding up the American flag. Now, from these islands, the United States began firebombing Japanese cities. Now, despite losing control of the Pacific and withstanding firebomb attacks, Japan refused to surrender. But by May of 1945, the war in Europe was fully over, and the United States began preparing for a land invasion of Japan. But perhaps a land invasion was not necessary. Let's consider this critical thinking question on whether or not to drop the atomic bomb. Let's go back to our notes here for clarity and answer the question together. So basically, jumping back to the doc here, Decision A, whether to build an atomic bomb. In August of 1939, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt received a letter from Albert Einstein, a brilliant and well-known physicist. In the letter, Einstein alerted Roosevelt that Germany might be building an atomic bomb. The following is an excerpt from Einstein's letter. In the course of the last 4 months, it has been made probable through the work of Joliet in France as well as Fermi and Szilard in America that it may be possible to set up a nuclear chain reaction in a large mass of uranium, one of the minerals essential to the construction of an atomic bomb, by which large amounts of power and large quantities of a new radium-like element would be generated. Now it appears almost certain that this could be achieved in the immediate future. This new phenomenon would also lead to the construction of bombs, and it is conceivable, though much less is certain, that extremely powerful bombs of a new type may thus be constructed. A single bomb of this type, carried by boat and exploded in part, might very well destroy the whole port together with some of the surrounding territory. However, such bombs might very well prove to be too heavy for transportation by air. I understand Germany has actually stopped the sale of uranium from Czechoslovakian mines, which she has taken over. Now, when Einstein wrote this letter to Roosevelt, the United States was not yet at war with Germany. However, the president took immediate interest in the scientific developments described in the letter. The bomb would not only be the most powerful weapon on Earth, but it would transform warfare by making it possible to kill more people with less effort. In the 18 months following Einstein's letter, members of the Roosevelt administration debated what action should be taken to counter the German threat. Some officials wondered how serious the threat really was, and in addition, not all scientists agreed with Einstein. In fact, 2 Nobel Prize-winning nuclear physicists, Enrico Fermi and Niels Bohr, believed that the construction of an atomic bomb was a practical improbability. Critical thinking question A. You are an advisor to President Roosevelt. Which of the following do you advise the president to do? And given what we know, be prepared to defend your answer. Ignore scientific developments and do not build an atomic bomb. Concentrate U.S. efforts on building conventional weapons such as faster planes and more powerful tanks. vigorously pursued the construction of an atomic bomb because the United States is in a race against the Germans, postponed the development of an atomic bomb and send spies into Germany to determine the accuracy of Einstein's letter, or do not develop the bomb, instead monitor the construction of new German weapon facilities and then send American bombers to destroy them, or denounce the development of atomic bombs as immoral, only evil could come from their development. Which one of these events happened and why? Look and listen carefully for the answer. Basically what happens here, and you might know this, is that FDR chose to do decision B. Now, why did FDR choose decision B? Well, you might be able to recall the fact that in 1939, Albert Einstein wrote US President Franklin Roosevelt about a potential to build a nuclear weapon. So FDR created a top secret program called the Manhattan Project to consummate this idea. Not even key people in government knew about this development. And of course, we, looking back right now, are very happy to have in place this amount of effort and energy in making of this weapon to bring about a quick and deliberate end to the war. Let's proceed to the next part of our presentation.